So, how do we nominate an individual? Motion to nominate one person. Move from there. Yeah. Yep.
Dr. Tripp. I'm not connecting to the network. No.
You're fine. You're fine.
We can do Norcross public in there.
So Vacant and Colin are both up, right? For Sustainable, Vacant and Colin. That's what I thought too. 3, 2, 1. Sustainable's easier. Okay. Yes, that's all 3. Oh, there's Laura. Who? Josh.
Norcross public, but it won't.
Okay, got it.
Yes, upper.
Some of the items on the agenda, or some of the names.
Goody. Does it come with a cookie? I grabbed 2 of those cookies. They're still sitting in my car.
I moved you down here. I brought you a full bottle of water.
That's true. Usually, so we're all sticking with the same.
In that debate, were you more comfortable with it when you saw it?
I'm still sorting that out.
Okay.
Yeah, we changed. If you could address that when we get to that.
Thank you, ma'am. Is anyone from the housing authority here?
We're not part of the show over here, so I'm okay staying. We can sit for a long time. They still have black strips on the other side of that line. Yes. Thank you, Tracy.
This says 10 foot. This is the property. That's what we're dealing with.
Thank you.
Then over on Reeves, we've got a street.
Yes, ma'am.
I've seen this before, so.
Monique, are we going to hear them with their microphones up?
Monique, are we ready? Okay. Counsel, ready?
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. I'll call this meeting to order. This is Monday, April 4th, and this is our regular mayor and council meeting. And the time is 6:35. We'll go right into the meeting. We have a very lengthy agenda, and I'm going to try to go through it as expeditiously as possible, but efficiently as possible. So I'm going to ask that we focus on the questions and continue to work on the issues that are brought up as they're delineated in the agenda. So we'll begin with the invocation with Council Member Josh Baer, and also the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would.
Okay, let's do it. All right, dear Father, I thank you for this day. Thank you, Lord, that we can gather here together. Thank you for all the nature outside, the azaleas blooming, and even the pollen, because we know that's helping all the plants to grow. Ask, Lord, I know there's lots of hurting in our world right now with fighting going on. Just ask, Lord, for peace across the world, and that cooler minds would prevail. And pray, Lord, specifically about our meeting tonight. Thank you that we can gather together and make these decisions for our community. Ask that we would have open minds and carefully consider everything brought before us, and that there would be collegiate and respectful debate and good decisions made. And pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Councilmember Baer, for that invocation. And we will move, again, expeditiously down the agenda. Item D, roll call. Let the roll show that all are present and accounted for. And we'll move down to item E, which is presentation of the previous minutes as printed. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve previous meeting minutes, Mr. Mayor.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motioned and seconded to approve the, Councilmember Myers?
Yes, to approve the January 27th
Yes.
Mayor and Council Vision Session, February 17th Mayor and Council Retreat, March 7th regular council meeting, and the March 21st policy work session.
Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Now, let's move down, take our eyes down to item
Special
F,
call meeting.
then down to
Does that need to be done?
items L, so that we can consider which items will be covered as a consent agenda item or a discussion item. So let's move to M, items for discussion, to see if they will remain consent or discussion. Number 1, bridge at Valley and Cochran.
Discussion.
Discussion. Budget amendment to reallocate salaries. Consent. Position reclassification. Consent. Wi-Fi in public parks. Discussion. Item 5, library landscaping. Revision to the Norcross Code 34-59.
Consent.
Clean agent fire suppression system. ARPA nonprofit grant program. Number 9, service contract with ACE for ARPA small contract business grant.
Consent.
Cdbg application proposal for FY23 funds.
Discussion.
Discussion.
Discussion? Okay. Speed and traffic calming measures studies update on selected city roadways.
Discussion.
Comprehensive electric inventory. Cured in place storm pipe relining project contracts.
Consent.
Sanitation Services Rfp.
Discussion.
Norcross letter art installation.
Discussion.
Participation agreement with Georgia Municipal Association Employees Benefit System.
Consent.
Consent.
Adoption, I'm sorry.
Consent. I was dragging my feet, I apologize.
Okay. Adoption of proposed 2023 SPLOST allocations.
Discussion.
Okay. And that concludes it. So before we go back up to item F to set the agenda, let me just briefly review where we are. Looks like number 1 was discussion, 2 was consent, 3 was consent, 4 was discussion, 5 is discussion, 6 is consent, 7 is consent, 8 is consent, 9 is consent, 10 is discussion, 11 is discussion, 12 is consent, 13 is consent, 14 is discussion, 15 is discussion, 16 is consent, 17 is discussion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as you just stated.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda as stated. Do we have an objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same sign. Motion passes. Now, let's move into the rest of the agenda for tonight. Again, I want to thank everyone for being out tonight. It feels good to have a change in venue and get back to normal. I know that a lot of us, a lot of businesses, a lot of our residents are looking forward to getting past this COVID crisis, and we're not completely there, but we're getting there. So, as we mentioned before, once the PCR positivity rate is below the 4%, we will certainly have our meetings at the regular places that we've had those before. And I think we'll talk about where we are in a little bit with Dr. Ona. As a matter of fact, Dr. Ona, we'll have you come up and give us an update. Thank you so much. Dr. Ona is, of course, over the Gwinnett Newton Rockdale Health Department, and she certainly has graced us with her appearance at several of these meetings to keep us up to date, and we certainly appreciate you being here tonight.
Yes, absolutely. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Happy to be with you. Do you want me to have the clicker, or do you want to? Okay, great. So as soon as she pulls that up. Great. So as you can see, I know it's a busy slide, but Worldwide, we're over 491 million cases and over 6 million deaths. These are cumulative cases since we started this pandemic 2 years ago now. United States is over 80 million cases and over 962,000 deaths. Georgia's currently over 2.5 million, just over 2.5 million cases with 31,000 plus deaths, and Gwinnett County currently sits at 207,529 cumulative cases, and deaths are at 1,737. So as you can see, the first graph with the United States, these are the new CDC indicators for county and community levels. So we are currently at the low category for that. On the right, you'll see the old measures for county indicators that actually represent case rates and also percent PCR positivity. And you can see that Gwinnett County is in the moderate range. If you looked on the dashboard at DPH today, the state dashboard, you would see that we're in very high category in that situation, and that's because there were about 9,500 cases that were added last week due to cases that were not counted in December, January, and some parts of February. So again, this is the accurate measurement that we are in the moderate category. It's important for you to see both of these because the healthcare institutions, long-term care facilities follow the measures on the right, the traditional ones, whereas some of the counties and schools and more municipal, more general residential following of CDC is more in line with the newer CDC indicators. So as you can see, our case numbers are still going down, which is really good. And the case rates, these are from the 28th. I didn't include them from today because of the inaccurate calculations due to the dumping of the cases from last week. So if you look today, you would see the published case rate at 179 for Georgia, but again, that represents a backlog of cases. So currently, Georgia's at 1.6% PCR percent positivity. Gwinnett County is currently at 47 cases. Again, this was on March 28. If you looked on today, it would represent 154, which is inaccurate. And the 1.4% for percent positivity, like you said, Mayor, it's definitely lower than 4%. So BA2, this is the sister Omicron variant, is now the dominant COVID variant in the United States. Nationally, it represents 55%. Last week was 39%, and I put that 4% in black next to it because that was the last time I presented to you, the BA2 was at 4%. So in a month, it's gone from 4% to 55%. Georgia is now at 40%. Again, a month ago, it was 2%. The Northeast is as high as 70%. So we're seeing some rise in cases in some of those states. Kentucky is also one that's doubled in the last 2 weeks. They're over 100% more than they were. The BA2 variant is really slowly increasing. There's no evidence of more severe disease, and our vaccine still looks like it's covered, covers this BA2 variant. But the boosters are critical for maximum protection, and it is more contagious and predicted to spread widely throughout the United States as we're seeing this. Just to let you know, the variants that we look for to come and future variants and also this, we really look at how they're going to affect three key areas. One is disease transmission, of course. The second one is severity of disease. And the third thing is the variant's ability, to really evade immunity from not only our vaccine, but evade immunity from prior infection also. So you can see vaccinations in the United States, we're at 66% overall population is fully vaccinated. Georgia's at 56%, and Gwinnett County is at 59%, with over 1.3 million doses in Gwinnett County having been given. And you can see the racial breakdown here, where 49% are black population, and our Hispanic population is at 43%. So again, we're still working on those populations. I did want to tell you that the second booster, or fourth dose, if you want to call it that, or sometimes a fifth dose if somebody had gotten a third dose from immunocompromised. So it's called the fourth or fifth dose now, depending on which way you do. But it's for people who are older, or 50 and older, and it's given 4 months now after the first booster. So if you remember, the first booster was given at 6 months, changed to 5 months after Omicron came out, and so this one is at 4 months, just for maximum protection for BA2. Also for 12 years old and older who are immunocompromised, those people can also get this. This is for the mRNA vaccines, so it's Pfizer and Moderna, but again, you have to remember that it's the Moderna is only approved for 18 and older, so if they were under 18 and wanted it, they would have to have Pfizer. And the other thing is 18 and older, if they received Johnson & Johnson, even with a booster of Johnson & Johnson, those individuals are also okay to get the booster, mRNA booster. So lastly, I just wanted to mention Paxlovid to you guys. I'm not sure that we talked about this much before, but this is the best treatment that we have now for COVID. It's over the counter, it's pills that you take at home, and all the variants respond to this so far. So it's it received its emergency use authorization in December, and it's available to anyone 12 and older who's at least 88 pounds, who has a positive COVID test and is considered high risk for hospitalization or death. And it requires a prescription, of course. So it's free right now to anyone because it's being allocated through the federal government. As long as there's a public health emergency, it'll be allocated by the government. You take it within 5 days of symptoms, very similar to Tamiflu, but Tamiflu is 48 hours from the onset of flu symptoms. It's basically for overall symptom improvement. But Paxlovid has been shown to have 89% decrease in hospitalization and death for those at risk once they take this, if they take it within 5 days of the onset of their symptoms. So side effects, really it affects the taste. It has a little bit of diarrhea, muscle aches, may cause a little bit of high blood pressure type of thing, but and it can alter. It has some, there's actually 2 medications in the Paxlovid, and I can explain to you how they work if you're interested, but nonetheless, it's 3 pills that you take twice a day for 5 days. And it can alter heart medications for arrhythmias. It can interfere with cholesterol medicine, but that wouldn't be a reason not to take it, because people can stop taking their, Lipitor for 5 days and it wouldn't matter, that much. But there is some chance that it can interact with in decreasing the metabolism of blood thinners, and so that would be an issue. So again, it's one of the reasons why it's available by prescription only. And we don't give this yet to women who are pregnant and breastfeeding, just because it's not been studied yet. There is another pill called Molnupiravir, which you probably heard of, by Merck, and that one is not. If Paxlovid is not available and the other treatments are not either, we do give that, but it's only reported to be 30% effective at stopping hospitalization or decreasing the likelihood of that. So that's why we are using Paxlovid instead. So that's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Very good, Dr. Ronan. Thank you so much for being here, and particularly the information on Paxlovid. I've not heard that, but thank you. Counsel, do we have any questions of Dr. Ronan at this time?
Wow. That's great. You guys
Thank
have a
you
big
so
agenda.
much. Thank you so much for being here,
You're
Dr.
so welcome.
Ronan.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to move to item G, 226448, which is a proclamation for Laura Hernandez. Laura, if you would come to the podium up here. This is in recognition of your service to the Sustainable Norcross Commission. And what I'll do is first of all, I'll read the proclamation, and I'll come down and give you the opportunity to say something. And the proclamation reads thusly: this is in recognition and celebration of dedicated service. Whereas change is constant and affects all cities, sustainability planning and plans can help manage this change in a way that provides better choices for how people work and live. Sustainability planning provides an opportunity for all the residents to be meaningfully involved in making choices that determine their future, the future for their community, and the full benefits of planning require public officials and citizens who understand and support and demand excellence in sustainability planning and plan implementation. Whereas Laura Hernandez has improved the Norcross community by contributing to the Sustainable Norcross Commission as a member. Lost my place. As a member, being instrumental in the Feet in the Street program. That was a good program. Thank you so much for that. The Feet in the Street recycling campaign, and greatly contributing to the Norcross recertification as an Atlanta Regional Commission Platinum Certified Green Community in 2022. Whereas Laura Hernandez has faithfully and conscientiously served the city of Norcross and its citizens, during which period of time numerous projects were initiated under her leadership, which will continue to have a growing sustainability impact on the city of Norcross. And whereas Laura Hernandez has been a powerful influence for the good and the growth and progress of our community. Whereas her performance of her duties and responsibilities as a member of this community has been characterized by excellence and constructive contributions to our entire community. Whereas, as our community looks back over its many years of being, a few individuals stand out for their caring, their contribution, their vision, which have made the city of Norcross such a fine place to live. Now, therefore, I, Craig Newton, commend Laura Hernandez for her valuable service, her dedication, and many contributions to the progress of the community and to the citizens of Norcross, and extend our personal thanks and those of the City Council and all of our citizens for her dedicated and faithful service. Let's give Laura a hand.
Thanks.
Laura, would you?
Thank you so much for those amazing words. I'm so honored and humbled to have served on the Sustainable Norcross Commission for the past 4 years. I've now moved on to the Gwinnett County Sustainability Commission, which just formed last year, and I'm the chairwoman of that commission. But I still, even on the Gwinnett Commission, I refer to Norcross as Gwinnett's greenest city, and a community that we can learn so much from, and that the county can take lots of lessons from as it becomes one of the most sustainable in the country, is my goal. So thank you so much for your support, for all the initiatives over the years, and my personal passion is waste reduction, so I hope that Norcross will keep up the good work in waste reduction and recycling. Thank you.
So much, Laura.
Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we will move to item H. The floor is open to citizens that desire to address the governing body. So if you would, if you have something you'd like to bring to us, please come to the podium, give your name and your address. And we're going to go as expeditiously as we possibly can.
A. Matt Fallen, 692 Camelot Way. At the February meeting, I noticed I was present. Was very pleased to see that the proclamation for a long time business owner at the death. His proclamation was at the beginning of the meeting. I think that's an excellent idea. Because last year we received a proclamation, and it was at the end of the service, and a 10-year-old has a hard time sitting through a long meeting. And at the end of it, he said, Grand, that was a long, boring meeting. And all the adults around said, we agree, because we couldn't hear half of what they were saying. So we need to make some improvement. But I do hope that proclamation is at the beginning from now on, because it's a really good thing. And we do appreciate it, though. And also, my big concern, I've got several concerns, but my big concern is code enforcement. We have got to have some great improvement on code enforcement. And especially, I don't know about some areas, but I ride the city. I've been here for 50 years, and I know familiar about a lot of stuff. And in my subdivision, constantly riding, so we need some improvements on code enforcement. They're not always the same. When a longtime citizen gets a fine for $200 for just parking for a short time on grass, when I see driveways that have got cars, big old ruts going beside those driveways, that's not good, because if they don't get punished as bad as some of us that's been here a long time, it's not right. So we need some improvements on code enforcement. And with the borders being wide open, I've already seen a lot more vehicles. And I do know that years ago we had problems with so many vehicles in a yard. So they put in force 4 vehicles with the 5th one having to prove they had a licensed driver. So we need to make sure that the code enforcement is going to abide by that, because it's beginning to get bad and we do not need that. So there's a lot that we can change and make better, and we would certainly appreciate it. And that just goes to show that a long-time resident had just a couple of lawnmowers under his carport. He was written up, said that they weren't supposed to have vehicles under there. Well, I can show you right now in my subdivision, they have got everything under some of these carports, and they're running businesses out from under those carports. So we need to make that as part of the change too. And then, so as I said, make sure that the number of vehicles is going to be abided by. And my grandson, I'm very involved with my grandson in the fall, with football, and in the spring with soccer. But when I have a chance, I make a big effort to try to have coffee with the council with a meeting that has been advertised. And when I show up and another person shows up, there are no council people. That's very discouraging, because it's not real easy to get up on a Saturday morning when you don't have to get up for soccer or football or something like that, or work. So anyway, if you're going to have the coffee with the council, make sure that you follow what is advertised, the date, and really put it out. But if you're not going to have it, that's fine. Just don't advertise it. But just make sure you do what you've got out there. And also, I have seen a trolley in the north part of the city of Norcross. I don't know where this trolley is going all the time, because I'm through this city an awful lot, and I've not seen it in other places except north of the railroad track. I'm a citizen, taxpaying citizen for 50 years, and I do know that all the money that is put out in the city is supposed to benefit all of the citizens and all of the area of Norcross. So with myself and some others that I've talked to, we need to know what this trolley is all about. And we would appreciate some information, and I do thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Faye. We certainly appreciate your comments. Anyone else at this time would like to address Mayor Council? Going once, going twice. Okay, let's move to comments by Counsel. Counsel, do you have any general comments at this time?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Yes. Councilmember Hickson.
One, I'd like to thank Laura for all of her service, especially when I had a crazy idea to shoot a video, which was really just an excuse to let me drive B. Grossman's Tesla. I really appreciate you letting me do that. we need to get some more views on that video. I hope everything in that video is still accurate, right? It is? Okay. Recycle the easy stuff and reduce. So I appreciate that so much. You've always been I mean, we'll still benefit from you being on the Gwinnett board, I'm sure. Ms. McFarland, I apologize. We've always had coffee with council every month. It was my bad, mea culpa. There was a communication issue between me and staff, and we did have coffee with council. I may have been there alone. Was I there alone? I think I was. Were you there, Bruce? Yeah, Bruce and I. It was the Dulce Sueños. It will resume as advertised at Cafe 45 South. So it was a misunderstanding between me and staff, and that was my fault. It was advertised correctly, and it was just at the wrong place. So I do apologize for that. We have pretty much had it uninterrupted since, since Pierre got elected and then COVID hit. So we'll keep going, and we hope to see you at this next meeting, which will be in 2 weeks from Saturday, or 1 week from Saturday, at Cafe 45 South.
Any other comments from council at this time? Councilmember Bear?
It's under announcements here, but there's a very special event coming up at Norcross that I'm incredibly fond of. The Easter egg hunt is on Saturday, April the 16th. We've gone a couple of years now without this Easter egg hunt. This is an amazing thing to see because, to Laura's point about waste cleanup, this team of kids that assembles is they are competent, and there will be the whole baseball field at Rosa Bundy Park will be covered with pieces of candy. I mean, like, you can barely see the grass. And in the span of maybe 180 seconds, maybe give them 240 seconds, that whole baseball field will be completely clean. There won't be a speck of candy still on it, and it's just a really fun event to see. So I just encourage everybody to check that out.
And be there on time.
Yeah, be there on time. If you are not there in time, there will be no candy unless somebody's feeling generous.
180 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay, at this point, we will move to comments by city manager.
Well, I'll just follow up on that comment by saying there are 17,500 eggs that will be put down between the morning event and then the special needs event later that day.
Recyclable eggs?
The ones for the special needs those are the ones that make sounds.
Okay.
Any other comments? Okay, then let's move to item PH, public hearings. Norcross Housing Authority. Tracy Rye, you have that one.
Yes, this is the application of the Norcross Housing Authority. It's regarding the repositioning of assets at 19 Garner Street. Norcross Housing Authority is proposing with their development partner, Walton Communities, phasing out of the functionally obsolete duplexes to replace them with up to 180 multifamily units. They are pursuing LIHTC 9% tax credits to the Georgia Department of Community Affairs. They propose 2 phases to include units for up to 60% of the area median income, some market rate, and senior units. We are proposing 17 conditions of approval for this project. It's been before the Planning and Zoning Board in early March. Most noticeable for the comments that we received and feedback at the policy work session was some concern expressed for its sidewalks and setbacks shown on Mitchell Road side of the project. In fact, this frontage along Mitchell Road was actually supposed to show the multi-purpose 10-foot sidewalk that's part of the Beaver Ruin Creek Greenway project as opposed to the 8-foot sidewalk and 2-foot landscape strip. We've updated condition number 8 to call for the 10-foot multi-purpose sidewalk there instead of the 8+2. And so we've modified that condition for you. And in addition, there was concern brought up about the proximity of Building 3 out to Reeves Street. The applicant is proposing a project with more of a Main Street feel, which follows our architectural design guidelines, where buildings meet the road wherever it's possible. And so we had actually proposed that the building meet the road, and they flipped the location of the parking lot that was parallel to Reeves Street. And so we proposed to switch it with the building and showing a 10-foot setback. from Reeve Street, with the parking sort of tucked away on the opposite side of the building so as to be less obtrusive to the residents that front out on Reeve Street, so that they wouldn't have to necessarily hear parking lot noise and see headlights. So that's part of that proposal there, and also meeting with our architectural design standards. The alternative, like I said, would be to flip it and put that parking lot next to Reeve Street, which would have been a little more obtrusive. And then there was a question regarding parking and the reduced parking for the senior level living. And actually, through our research, we have found and concur with Walton and Norcross Housing Authority that actually seniors do need a little less parking. We don't expect that reduced parking for the senior level living will be a problem. And in addition, there are 3 known bus stops along Mitchell Street, one up at Price Place, and then 2 down at Everglades. So we figure that the access to the public transportation will help safeguard against any uncontrolled parking configurations on site. Then there were some questions about amenities and mix of uses, and that's actually going to be covered more in depth and probably more adequately by Walton and the Norcross Housing Authority in their presentation as part of the public hearing. So I'm going to defer those comments to them because they can better flesh that out in a more intelligible manner than me. So like I said, we are recommending approval of the application with 17 conditions, number 8 being modified to reflect the 10-foot multi-use path for the Beaver Ruin Creek Greenway.
Thank you so much, Tracy, for that elegant presentation. We will, at this point, we will open the floor for questions from the public. If you have any questions or concerns, you can come to. Okay. Well, we certainly will welcome that presentation.
Good evening. I'm Jenny Wilkerson with Walton Communities. I'd also like to introduce Beth Brown, the Executive Director of the Norcross Housing Authority, and John Maddox, our Development Associate. I know you have a packed agenda, and Tracy covered a lot of things, so if at any point you want to skip to just directly what your questions or concerns are, let me know, and I can skip to those things. The title is the Walton NHA City Council presentation. It's the bottom attachment.
Is this your presentation?
Yes.
If you can just give us a 1,000-foot view, I think we've had an opportunity to read through the information. So
Okay, so if we'll go to the next slide.
not the 3,000-foot, but the 1,000.
Got it. All right, so the outline that we have tonight is to first reiterate who we are as Walton Communities and what our role in the development is. And then 2, we want to revisit some of the basic property information, those specifically highlighting some of the areas where there's been questions today. And the last part is to provide a number of pictures to give you a sense of what it is that we want to develop here without having to go through the Architectural Review Board yet. So Walton Communities has been developing affordable housing since 1989. We've submitted 34 LIHTC applications over the past 20 years. Our role is to be a turnkey development partner with the Housing Authority, so we'll handle everything from planning and zoning to design and the overall construction execution. We're also going to be their long-term partner and co-owner for at least 15 years. And last, we're a fully integrated development company, so we have our own in-house property management company that's going to lease and manage the community going forward. So this we'd just like to highlight. We're in the business of building neighborhoods and serving residents in a way that goes far beyond what the tax credit program requires. And so we would like to highlight some of those things as they relate to what amenities we're providing and what type of community we're building. But we're highly leveraging our partnership with the Norcross Housing Authority, although we're from outside the community. All right, so I know that most of you are familiar with the overall property information, so I want to highlight the amenity portion here. So as Tracy mentioned in her report, we're required by the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit Program to have a certain set of amenities. What we've selected here captures that, but also beyond, in order to offer the programs and services to our residents across multiple phases of life that are typically geared towards access to education, employment, transportation, recreation, healthcare, and health education. So in the first phase, we plan to offer a fully furnished fitness center, a community center with a full kitchen that has multiple seating areas, a beautifully landscaped outdoor exterior garden with a grill and seating that's covered, and also an arts and crafts center, and then a laundry facility. And so those are sort of the baseline DCA amenities, but we're going to show you pictures of how we kind of take it to the next level and the quality of the finish out, and also in the programming that we cater towards within those. There were a few questions in the work session about a pool, and I wanted to quickly address that. Typically, a pool works on a tax credit community when you have many more units, and this is a much smaller site. So the trade-off with this site and not having a pool is that we get the opportunity to do 2 different phases, and that covers multiple generations. So you've got senior and family to cater to more residents and not just doing one big phase with only family, at which point we could potentially do a pool. So any questions?
We'll let you go through the entire
Okay.
presentation, then at that time we'll.
Okay, sure. All right, so the next was on the perking ratio. So as Tracy mentioned, the planning and zoning has approved a 1.5 ratio per the family phase per unit, and then a 1.25 per unit on the senior phase. So in reality, what we've experienced in our senior communities is a 1-to-1 ratio. And it's also worth noting that DCA only requires, that's the Georgia Department of Community Affairs, they only require 1-to-1 on all of their senior projects. And so that's why we were proposing a lower requirement than the family phase, but not as low as what we typically experience. And so all in, we'll have about 270 spaces while including the parking on Reef Street. And the next thing I want to highlight is on our unit mix. There were some questions on the types of unit, subsidies and what market rate units were. And so to simplify this, 80% of our property are going to be our tax credit units. And these are specifically tied to the renter whose incomes are at the 50 to 60% at area median income, or AMI, per the slide. The rest of the units are what we're targeting workforce housing market. And these residents are your typical 80 to 120% of AMI type renters who are your healthcare workers or teachers or whatnot, who a 4-bedroom or a 4-person family, for example, with an income of $70,000 a year is priced out of projects like the Brunswick or Broadstone Junction. And so as you can see here, our market rate units are set much lower and are around $400 to $1,000 per unit per month below what they're offering. And in addition to that, we also obviously have our low-income housing tax credit units, which are a significant discount to that. And so that's what we mean by unrestricted market rate units. We're not going for the Brunswick type renter. We're going for the 80 to 120 workforce type renter. All right, so in the next couple of slides, we have a few pictures of our typical amenities and interior spaces to give you a sense of what we build. So on the top left picture here, we have an adventure center, which is an area specifically for after-school programming for school-age kids. On many of our communities, on all of our affordable communities actually, we partner with a nonprofit called Mission 127, who basically funds and operates all of this after-school programming for kids between elementary to high school all year round. So they're sending kids to summer camp, they're offering reading, tutoring, and I would note that none of this is actually required by DCA. We go above and beyond to provide these services for our residents. And then another amenity here in our top right, we've got our typical community center where you have many places to sit. You have a full kitchen, and it's here we'll host a number of different types of resident events that include both senior and family residents. And then you can see here a fully furnished fitness center and then our arts and crafts center. But what we'd like to highlight is these don't look like a low-income housing tax credit project at all. We're going above and beyond what the minimum required type of build-out are for these in order to provide the best level of programs and services for our residents. And on our next slide, this on our top left is an example of a smaller community space that we would have specifically for our senior residents on the next phase. We also have an example of a beautifully landscaped courtyard that's actually a tax credit community. And then on our bottom left, this is one of our larger family communities with a covered playground and astroturf. And then on our bottom right, we've got 2 different community garden spaces for our senior residents. Next, we have here pictures of very comparable interiors of a LIHTC project that we have with the Gainesville Housing Authority. So this is to give you a sense of the type of cabinetry, countertops, flooring, and appliances that you'll see in this community. And then next, most of us have seen all of the site plans to date, and so we can go into details on setbacks or whatever questions you have towards the end, but these are elevations that we're going to tie actual pictures to that are going to be very comparable to what we're presenting here, but we don't have the full set of plans and elevations to date. Okay, so these are two examples of very comparable multi-phase projects that we did in conjunction with, in partnership with two different housing authorities. These are a little bit larger than what we're proposing here. There are 3 different phases of tax credits, but they include both senior and family units, and then also have shared amenities as well. And these are all comparable tax credit projects that we've built within the last 5 years. And as you can see, each has a unique elevation, but are largely similar in the amount of, in the ratio of brick to hardy plank siding. We have similar landscaping, occasional metal roofs, and then sometimes we have balconies. But this is comparable to what we plan to build. And next, I want to quickly show some of our market rate communities to show that we're not departing significantly in terms of the quality of construction or landscaping when it comes to market rate or tax credit. These look very comparable to what we're building on the tax credit side, just to give you a sense of that comparison. And then these are 2 projects that we have under construction. The first one will be moving residents in this summer, and then the second early fall. What I want to highlight about these 2 site plans is that, similar to what we're proposing here, we've worked to tuck the parking back behind the buildings and create a streetscape along the public right-of-way. And then also the elevations, which we'll see better in the next slide. This is the most comparable to what we think we're going to ultimately build here. So the mix of brick, the hardy plank exterior, and then a larger emphasis on brick at certain inflection points like our leasing office and community center in the community. And last, we'll quickly go through what we're planning for Mitchell and Reeves Street. And if you have any specific questions on those, we can address at that point. And so in our next slide, you can see what the existing condition is at Mitchell and Garner Road, which we're keeping this entrance. And then the next slide, this is an example of a property entrance along a public right-of-way that has a more extended landscape buffer. And so this is in line with what we would do with the 10-foot sidewalk as well as the 10-foot landscape buffer as proposed in the latest update per Tracy. And then next, we have the existing condition on Reef Street with the parallel parking and the single-family residences across the street. And these are examples of both market rate and tax credit communities that have a landscape setback and sidewalk against parallel parking in a public right-of-way, just to give you a sense of the type of landscaping and streetscape that we think will be seamless between the multifamily all the way to the single-family residence. And as Tracy mentioned, if you were to flip and have the parking next to the single-family, it would be more obtrusive. There would be lights and also potentially glare and additional noise that would be unwanted. But this creates more of a true neighborhood walkable feel that we think will be a significant upgrade from what's there today. So with that, I would like to turn it over for any questions, if there's any need for clarifications from what we've shared today.
Thank you so much for that presentation. So at this point, we will extend the invitation first to the public. If there are any questions that you'd like to bring at this time. Second call. Third call. Okay, we will then turn the remainder of the questions over to counsel at this time. Counsel, you have the opportunity to ask any questions that you have.
I have a few questions, Mr. Mayor. As the site plan is ahead of us, I'd like to chat about the site plan specifically. Could we pull up a map of the subject property or the proposed? Do you have this on a slide so the citizens can see it?
Yes, it should be probably on, actually look at the top attachment.
Perfect, thank you so much. So on the site plan, it says 8-foot sidewalk with a 2-foot grass strip. I'm assuming we're losing the grass strip?
We are, it would be replacing the 10-foot wide sidewalk.
So we'll be gutter, street, sidewalk?
Sidewalk, gutter, street, gutter, sidewalk, 10-foot landscape strip. And
Okay.
all contained with the 40-foot future.
So the pedestrians would be right on Mitchell Road? Without any buffer? Okay. Well, that's what we need for, is there any way to get a 10-foot sidewalk in there besides that?
There's still additional room.
Okay. That would be ideal for me personally. The facility, I've looked through this and I have not seen any, your facility for stormwater management, those can end up very, very ugly. They're not very attractive, the facilities for stormwater management, as this will be on a public road next to what amounts to some sort of private-public partnership. Do you have an example of what this will look like? Will it be enclosed?
I don't have an example of a comparable picture of a detention that's tucked behind landscaping on this presentation, but if you look on the landscaping plan, you can get a sense for the tree
It's just
buffer.
trees and,
The tree buffer that we're going to put between the public right-of-way and the detention pond so that it's tucked away and you really can't see it.
okay. Will that be subject to the ARB's purview as well?
Detention pond, no, but it'll be subject to the review of the city engineer, and they're proposing underground detention, or it could be a combination of open and underground, but there is a possibility for underground detention here.
Okay, that would be ideal for me as well. The last is, I don't think you have much control over it, neither do I, but Beauty Baldwin is right there behind your facility, and there's a walking track right behind your facility, and we're gonna have some seniors that are gonna have to go on to Mitchell Road, which we've just discussed will be on the road, go all the way down to Price Place. I would just encourage you, from a market standpoint, to talk to Beauty Baldwin and see if there's any way we can make a path for your residents and ultimately our residents through the little green space there to get up there. That's a much harder ask probably than, and I don't think we can even encourage you to do that, but from a market standpoint, that would probably be very beneficial to your residents.
Okay.
And that's all of my questions. And again, I'd like to see the buffer between the grass strip, or an added grass strip, maybe take into that 10-foot buffer, make the buffer 8 feet, and then some sort of underground detention facility as discussed with the city engineer.
Thank you, Councilmember Hickson. Are there any other comments? Councilmember Gaynor?
The one thing that I noticed when I looked through the pictures is you've got a 4-story building fronting Reeve Street, and the present elevation is a bank that runs. There's a bank already up from the level of the street to the level of the landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
Putting a 4-story building, which is on top of what is already about a half-story high, it's going to be a big wall visually at Reeve Street. Is there any way to switch the 4-story to one of the interior buildings?
Yeah, so it's actually a 3-4 split, and so it's still going to be at the 35-foot building height. And so the 4-story...
35 feet from where? From the street or from the foundation, from the entry?
From the street, I believe.
So you're
If
going
the-
to excavate when you look at Reeve Street, and you look at the photograph of Reeve Street, there is a bank between Reeve Street and where the buildings are. The buildings are at a higher level than the street. By, it looks like 6-7 feet, just from the picture. And
Yeah.
so if you started at that point, you're going to have a very tall building.
Right, so in order to be level with the existing Reeve Street, although we're going to be redoing that parallel parking there, we'll be, I believe, grading down to be at site level so that we're
So you
not
take
going
the
to
first
be...
floor will be level with.
Yes,
more or less
exactly.
level
So
with
they'll
Reeve Street.
be able to walk out at Reeve Street.
When you say 3-4 stories, what is that? What do you mean by that? What does that refer to?
So it,
It's either 3 or 4, but I don't know.
one level is technically a basement, you know, so they're both 3 stories, but
Oh,
it's
so it's
the
3 stories.
topography.
Okay, so one's a basement.
Yes.
So does that mean that if I'm looking at Reeve Street, will be 4 stories above Reeve Street and 3 stories above the parking lot behind it?
Okay, so Reeve Street, if you look on the elevations, I think it's easier to see. I think it's exterior elevation, building 3. On the 3 stories is gonna be along Reeve Street, and the basement will be on the other side.
Basement walkout?
Well,
Or is it just a basement?
it's not technically a basement. I'm sorry, I'm not explaining this very well, but what you're looking at, if you're on Reeve Street, is only a 3-story building, up to 35 feet. But because of the topography, there's a 4th level on the other side. Can you find
The
I
Garden
don't have
Street's
a
lower than Reeve Street. I think
topographic
that's
map,
true.
so what you're saying is it slopes up and then back down? Because it slopes up from Reeve Street to where the buildings are today. It slopes up.
Yes.
So you're gonna grade down, but as the other side of the building will be even lower?
I think, is there a way that we could possibly, if I could maybe send some explanation outside of this so that I can, our construction person is not with us tonight because it's spring break and he can explain this a lot more eloquently.
Let me tell you my concern. My concern is that sometimes when we build townhouses in the city, when they're done, they look great on the drawings, but when they're done, it looks like a wall. And it would be, I would like to see that avoided, right? To see the continuous high, essentially a wall between Reeves or any of the streets from a visual perspective.
Right, so that's why we included that last slide with comparable 10-foot setbacks with properties with the landscaping to where it has, you know, you've got your 3-story, 35-foot building, but then you have a row of street trees to create a soft transition to the public right-of-way, and then you have the parallel spaces, and it doesn't appear as a drastic wall right up on the street. And so that's kind of how we're trying to combat avoiding that so that we, you know, it's a soft transition and feels like more of a neighborhood street versus just a wall and then parallel parking.
Okay, well, I'd like to see what the construction people have to say about exactly how that looks. I'm pretty confused about it.
Okay,
Can I clarify your question? Because I'm a little, Tracy, is the 4 on Reeves or is the 4 on Garner?
It's like the 4 is going to be from Gardner, but it's going to be hidden by the trees. Or you're going to be able to see the 4th floor from Gardner. Can I excuse me, Reeves?
I think the 4th floor is going to be on Reeves.
I think it is too.
but you're only looking at 3 stories though from the street. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, the 4 is on, you'll have a level on Reeves.
Yeah.
But you won't have on Garner.
That's exactly what I'm trying to get to.
So
Okay.
it's 4 stories up from the Reeves, and behind it, it's 3 stories.
Yes.
That's what I thought it was.
Right, and take advantage of the natural topography to get to 3 foot, right?
Looking at the pictures, it looks like the topography slopes up and doesn't really indicate whether it continues sloping up or it slopes down again. It probably
It does
not
look like
slope
it
down.
slopes up. If you go to Google Street View, it does appear to slope up from Reeves to Gardner.
Yeah, so it's going to be pretty tall on Reeves. is
It's
what
gonna have
I'm
to be
saying.
at least
It's going
a-
to be a 4-story building on Reeves Street. That's pretty tall.
It's going to be a 3-story building on Gardner Street.
But Gardner is the back. Gardner no longer is a
It's not
street
gonna
other than
exist, but-
it's the apartment. It's the interior parking lot of the building.
Community, yeah.
For the community. I'd be less concerned about that than on the public street, which you've got neighbors that are going to be across the street that were across the street from bungalow type housing and now are going to be across the street from a 4-story building. That's my concern.
How would you like to see that concern rectified?
I'm not an architect. I don't have suggestions. I'm only saying that this is
I think they're valid. I'm
of
just,
a concern that you're going to end up popping a really tall building next to single-family homes.
Yeah, at least in the context of this, the best way we knew to kind of mitigate that concern was to show the streetscape and the, buffer we would like to create so that it creates a softer transition over to the single family.
Okay.
It's beneficial, we've yet to go to ARB, they'll be at the end of the process.
Mm-hmm.
We can work with ARB to mitigate that.
But we're still approving the site plan, which would include.
Right, they still have to approve the architecture.
Right, but, and I'm not trying to get into the architectures here. I'm just trying to look at sort of the 3,000 foot level, Mr. Mayor.
I hear you.
And seeing what you can do to mitigate this as an issue, because I can see certainly residents across the street not expecting to live across the street from a four-story building. Now, you might also argue that a four-story or a three-story isn't that big a difference, but it is a difference. So if you could probably take a look at that and see what maybe you can come up with. I'm not an architect, so it doesn't sound to me like a 10-foot buffer really is going to soften it up by all that much, but I'd just like you to take a look at this.
What if building 2 is 4 stories?
Well, that my objections would go away. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Well,
I don't know if that's possible.
So those are separate phases. So
Yeah.
that 3-4 split building would be a part of phase 2. So we do have more time where we can determine the density and what is the unit mix if we can do it in a 3-story. But that's how we have our site plan laid out currently. But that wouldn't be until the second phase of development. But from a density perspective, it's difficult to shift units into that other building. We have the 2 buildings targeting 90 units. But we can certainly look at options.
Any other additional questions, council?
That's my only.
Okay,
Councilmember Bear?
so I agree with Councilmember Hickson about the 2-foot grass buffer. Mitchell's a pretty busy road, and having that 10-foot sidewalk right on it, to me, is not an option. And I agree about the underground detention in the front. We have detention at the post office down here that all of us consider an eyesore, and the last thing we want to do is have open detention ponds
With a
in the
fence
front.
around it.
And on the landscape plan, what it shows along the front, what it shows, at least if I'm reading this right, is it shows willow oaks along the street here on Mitchell to hide the detention pond. And if there's not things under those willows, then they're just going to grow up, and then there's just going to be a trunk, and you're going to be able to see straight through to the retention unless there's not going to be much that's going to grow underneath the willows, so you're just going to be able to see the retention ponds.
We would like to put more detention pond underground. We were instructed that underground detention is somewhat of an issue, and so we're, waiting until we have a city engineer look at all of this, but if we could put more or all of it underground, that would be ideal given the site constraints of how small it is, because the above ground takes up so much space, and to your point, it's difficult to hide back there.
Okay, so the recycling center, we just had somebody get recognized here in our town who's made great strides in helping us to make sure that multifamily has got recycling option, because a lot of the multifamily that we have in town doesn't have recycling. So it just seems to me like the area that you guys have here for trash and recycling is if I'm reading this right, it's mostly made up of the compactor, and then doesn't seem to be a lot of, I just would love to see, I would love there to be specifically a space set aside for recycling, because a lot of times the only options that we have right now is just to have a whole bunch of regular bins out there for recycling, but I think in the future we're going to try to improve on that. So, I mean, what would be even cooler is that the community did something like some kind of compactor-sized unit that could put glass and plastic and everything, and it went alongside the regular garbage one. Then the last thing that I would say is that along Reeve Street, you guys have got a ton of willow oaks in a really tight space, and even along the front here, you guys have got a ton of willow oaks, and these trees are big. They get 40 to 60 foot tall. They have a spread of 30 to 40 feet. So I recognize that you're probably trying to conform with our tree ordinance, but personally, what I'd like to see is trees used in here, especially along Reeves. First of all, I agree with Councilmember Gaynor about 4 stories is too tall for that building along Reeves, and these trees should be more like ginkgos, like we've used in town, more of a small to medium-sized street tree, because these willows aren't going to be healthy, and they're just squished in here. That's my input. I would say one thing positive. I mean, there's a lot of positive things I could say, but I would highlight that I love all the sidewalks in here. There's lots of places for folks to walk, and then I like the screening that you've got with the deodors and the green giants around the edges.
We'll certainly take a look at the recycling program, and then also we have a little bit of room in terms of our setback on Reeve Street, just as a side note that we can continue to look at in terms of mitigating that building height as it relates to Reeve Street, and then also point taken about the landscaping along that streetscape.
Is that the case, Tracy, that they're required to? I mean, it's just crazy. You're going to bring in all these 5-inch willows. They're not going to do well, and they're going to be crowded up on the building. They're not going to be able to breathe. It's just.
And it's a good thing we now have a full-time arborist on staff reviewing plans, so we can have them work for a mix of trees in their landscape.
Councilmember Mars?
So my question is specific to the rent detail section. So the 50%, 60% AMI, that's for the first 15 years of the project, or is that throughout the life of the project?
That's throughout, it's 30 years.
30 years, okay. And the unrestricted, that's, I mean, you mentioned on one slide, I think it said 80%, and then when I go to the rent details, it says unrestricted. Is the intent to start those at 80% work in a workforce housing number, and then eventually go those to unrestricted, or is there something, since the LIHTC doesn't require that portion, what's your thoughts? I mean, what's your plans or on that, Walton's plans?
Yeah, so we can set the rents at whatever we want. We could match the Brunswick, but our intent is to fulfill a need in the workforce market because we think there's a demand for that rent level. And so we've conservatively set it at 80%, but we typically see those lease at 80 to 120% of AMI. But we wouldn't expect a typical Class A true market rent type renter to lease at one of these buildings. And so that's why, although we could set it there, we don't. We try and set it to what we think there's a gap in the market and where there's going to be a legitimate renter pool.
Okay. That was really my only question, is to a little bit more about the rent detail.
Any other questions at this time?
Have you thought any more, I guess this is an odd question, but have you or the NHA thought, we're sticking strictly to this parcel, has there been any thoughts to assemblage?
Yes, if that would be an opportunity, then we would definitely encourage taking on additional density. The only issue is for this first phase, we know that we have a highly competitive score for 9% credits, and so we want to get the first phase awarded. And then as for the second phase, if there's an opportunity to acquire an adjacent parcel and increase the density of the site to do an additional larger phase or potentially 2 additional phases, then we would certainly entertain that and then come back through this process to evaluate the updated site plan.
You've used the term, are we talking about the same phases? Because this gentleman mentioned phase 2, or is that?
So phase 2.
Are we talking about 2 different, if this site plan is approved, will all 3 buildings come out of the ground?
Okay, so if this site plan is approved, in the near term, this would be 1 tax credit application this year, and then the next time we could apply for tax credits for the second phase would be next year. And so
that would be
it would
this building along Reeves?
Yes, and so it'd be built over 2 phases.
So theoretically, that would give you opportunity for any other additional resources you might want to put onto the market?
Yes, so for that last senior phase it's this building along Reeve Street, we could potentially build a larger phase.
Okay.
Or build 2 additional phases.
Is it zoned? Will that work into the current zoning if it fell?
We'd have to come.
I'm just worried about the site plan, because if we're approving a site plan now, and the site plan, one second.
But we're
Let my brain catch up with my eyes.
Yeah, well, I guess I'm hearing what you're saying here.
Yeah.
So we're approving site plan for phase 1. However, the whole entire site is a part of the
You're approving site plans for phase 1 and 2.
phase 1 and 2.
Yes.
But if you were to change anything on phase 2, that would come through this whole process again.
Okay, that's exact, thank you.
Yes.
Since that's on a little bit longer of a timeline, if there was an opportunity to increase our density, then we would absolutely come back through.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. Counsel, if there are no additional questions, Chair will entertain a motion at this time.
Sounds like you want to get back with us some information. What's your time frame here?
I guess that's a question for you. I can try and provide a number of different elevations in our portfolio to give you comfort, other than what we've already provided in our, which include comparable 30, 40 buildings along the public right-of-way. And so I'm not really sure what else, other than sending you examples and landscaping streetscapes, that's going to get you comfortable, other than, you know.
Well, I guess the two parts of that is, one, yes, some examples of what this might look like. But a second might be, what would it mean to go back and increase the density of the interior building, or the height of the interior building instead of the one on the street? If that's a possibility.
Well, the ARB is going to meet, so I guess our actions would supersede the ARC's actions, ARB's actions.
We had initially hoped that ARB would come later and we'd be satisfied with how they worked
Right.
out. But I think the height requirements are such that you want them to give their recommendation on those building elevations and height.
Mhm.
You could go ahead and approve the actual zoning tonight and then come back and have the final approval on the building heights.
Does that work within the time frame for these LIHTC
They
applications?
have to have it, zoned and taken care of to turn their application into DCA next month. But that's sort of different than our building heights and our elevations.
So essentially, there are time constraints.
There are time constraints for actually getting the actual zoning portion taken care of.
It's already
The
zoned.
ARB portion.
If we can still have an opportunity to maybe take a second look at exactly how these are arranged.
And we can bring that back to you after ARB has done that, if you will.
Okay.
And we can have you do that.
I'm a little confused.
Normally ARB.
So this is
would look at
PRD,
this-
so
Yes.
we're just going through the PRD process, which
Right.
although we're approving a site plan, is this a technical rezoning through our
It
process?
technically still remains a rezoning, the approval of the site plan.
Okay.
And under normal circumstances, if it wasn't a LIHTC project that was limited in time, it would have already been to ARB rather than ARB visiting last. But owing to those special considerations with timelines for the LIHTC program, we've amended how we handle this one.
Can we do a special call, if we so chose, could we do a special call meeting on the 18th to review?
If they can turn it around.
So, yes,
Good evening, sir, if I can. My name is Melody Glauton with Anderson, Tate and Carr, 1960 Satellite Boulevard in Duluth. It's my privilege to be
The attorneys
here.
have shown up.
Yes, sir, if I can, for just one moment. It is my privilege to be here this evening. I'm here on behalf of Walton Communities. I think that you do have an opportunity to approve this case this evening. One of the zoning conditions that you have before you, it indicates that the applicant must submit the architectural drawings and details to the Architectural Review Board and require the ARB meeting prior to applying for any permits. So that could give this council some relief and understand that any changes to the site plan that you may have would have to be approved by the ARB board. So you can approve this case this evening and approve the rezoning and then move forward, and they would have to go before the ARB board for those things that you would have concern. One of the other issues I know that you've had this evening as well with regard to the actual height and things like that is the buildings are actually 3-story buildings, and there's one that's the 3/4 split. But Tracy can correct me if I'm wrong, that is something that the ARB board could address through that process. So you could continue to approve this, and that would also be addressed before the ARB.
Okay.
And I would also note that that's part of our, That building is part of our second phase, and so if the conclusion was that we need to go down to 60 or 70 units to take the building height down, then we could do that. But what I can't really promise tonight is that we can move all of those units into the other phases
Right.
without increasing the building height of those.
Sure.
And I
Okay.
think that one of the concerns is that there is a time issue, only because of the nature of this project and concerns with keeping this case on track in terms of the approvals that are required.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to approve RZ 2022-004 with the conditions as stated, with an edit of item number 8. 10-foot sidewalk, 10-foot landscape strip with street lights shall be installed along Mitchell Road in conformance with Beaver Ruin Creek Greenway plan. I'd like to edit that into a 10-foot sidewalk with a 8-foot landscape strip and a 2-foot buffer on Mitchell Road, and the rest of the, in conformance with the Beaver Ruin Creek Greenway. Condition number 14, location of stormwater detention is subject to the approval of the city engineer. I would edit that. Location of underwater stormwater detention is subject to the approval of the city engineer as feasible. Item number 17, the applicant is reminded that this approval assumes general conformance with the adopted City of Norcross architectural site design standards and the Unified Development Ordinance. The applicant is responsible for conforming with any design standards or subject to the code section not addressed in the staff report, as well as approval by the with the ARB. Actually, strike that. Number 16 covers that. Does that meet everyone's? Well, that's my motion.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor by Councilmember Hickson, seconded by Councilmember Beckles. With the conditions and enacting clause as read. Any objection to moving the question?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend the motion, and that motion would be that for building number 3, I'm understanding that building number 3 is part of phase 2, and so the amendment to the motion would be that final approval on the height of building 3 is subject to council's approval. And then the second item that I would add is that the, let's see here, and that also that the landscaping plan specifically for building number 3 is also re-subject to council when that phase comes around. Those would be my 2 amendments.
Okay, we have a
Right,
motion.
Mr. Mayor, which are on my proposal, if it's okay with my seconder, there's obviously a lot more for us to work on before we can get the motion tonight. That's pretty drastic change in our standard our standard operating procedure, and I'm worried about the time frame. So, I withdraw my proposal so we can maybe have some formal discussion again.
Motion has been withdrawn.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tracy, if this is subject to the ARB, Mr. Bear has said that he would like to see it be subject to the council. As the ARB is an independent operating board, he is correct, we would not have additional purview over it. When would it be feasible for us to meet again and still be, when does the ARB meet?
They haven't even submitted anything for the ARB to consider, so it's not even queued up to go in April or May to the ARB. I think it's appropriate, as Councilman Baer put it, to sort of claw it back to final approval. ARB would have been a recommending body if we'd run a traditional process for this particular PRD. So they would have been just a recommending body and not a final source. You are the final source with everything. So I think it's adequate, if it pleases mayor and council, that conditions 18 and 19 be added in and you be the final approvers and ARB as a recommending body.
Do we have a time frame that this would work? If they have where's our attorney?
I think actually the goal right now is for them to get through zoning, and we've always known that it's going to take a little bit longer to get to those architectural elevations.
Okay.
So
Well, that makes
I
sense
think
then.
we definitely have plenty of time, and it would come back to you still under RZ 2022-004. So the only thing we accomplish right now is the zoning, and then we take it back up when they're ready to move it to the ARB.
Does that satisfy your request?
I think it does.
Yeah, I have one more question or add. We talked about the recycling piece. So of the amendments that we made previously, we made the amendments of the setback. We made the amendments of the landscaping we made the amendments of the elevation and height in building 3. But the only point that I met that we did not talk about in those from what we just discussed here was this recycling, which they said they were going to look at. So I would say if we reissue that motion that we include the recycling as well.
And recycling's actually a
Yeah.
part of the city's code of ordinance for multifamily properties. So that was written by legal, I think, in 2018. So that's an embedded piece of the code that would actually be covered under existing condition number 17.
Yeah. Okay, well, I thought that's good to bring up.
Yep. Okay. I guess I just would say that I recognize that it's part of our code now, but in looking at the Brunswick right here, you know, it's awkward because they just have a whole bunch of bins right outside the driving in and out. It's just very awkward and ugly. And so I can appreciate that it's in our code, but we can make a higher requirement at our will here if we care to.
I don't know. We'll have to ask counsel. You have a code that we're following relative to recycling. So we would supersede our current code.
I appreciate that, Mr. Mayor. I would say that it would be screened better. The recycling could be screened better.
Okay.
So really that would be part of the recycling, the landscaping piece.
Yeah.
It would be in addition to the landscaping piece, we would either screening or foliage or trees or whatever.
Right.
Okay.
So that's,
That one's probably good for you.
is this item 18, or condition 18, final approval of landscaping is subject to council, and then item 19 is final approval of elevation height subject to council. Is that kind of what we're all settling on?
That's for just phase 2 for building number 3. Phase 2.
For item number, for condition number 19?
Mm-hmm.
19 conditions. Hey, it's our new process. It's our new process, right?
That's just the way I roll.
Yeah. Oh, are we all clear
Okay.
on our questions, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, we're as clear as mud. Tracy, where are we with this?
We started with my 17 original conditions of zoning, and then condition number 8 was amended to include a 2-foot landscape strip adjacent to the right-of-way, a 10-foot sidewalk, and then an 8-foot landscape strip interior to the property. 14, location of underground stormwater detention subject to the approval of the city engineer as feasible. I had amended condition number 16, but then we came on condition number 18 is added by Councilmember Bayer, building 3, part of phase 2. Final approval of the height is subject to mayor and council approval. Condition number 19, landscaping plan for building 3, subject to council approval. And then enhanced, condition number 20, enhanced recycling screening.
How will this be covered in our minutes? I mean, I agree with what she said. Is this going to be covered in our minutes?
The minutes are
You'll take it directly from her?
and the minutes are video recorded also.
Okay, so we'd be clear with that, council?
Okay. At this time, we would,
I'd like to make a motion to approve the rezoning as requested and as our development director has summarized.
we have a motion by Councilmember Hicks and sounds like Councilmember Beckles, second. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, let's move to item J, reports of mayor and council. Council, do we have any reports at this particular time?
Haven't started our agenda yet.
Really? The only report that I have was relative to today. We had a great Earth Day celebration as we recognize Gaylord Nelson for starting this many, many years ago, and we're doing it today. And also, we have several announcements that I'll cover some of those once we get to that particular point. Counsel, do you have anything? All right, Neighborhood Recycling and Cleanup Day, Saturday, April the 9th. And as I mentioned this morning, I'm proud of this because I actually started it 50 years ago with my scout troop, 468, with Mayor Bryant. And 50 years later, we're still doing it, so I'm proud of that. But this Saturday, April 9th, 8 to 3, is the Recycling and Cleanup Day. Coffee with Counsel is coming up Saturday, April 16th. Everybody be there, be square. Right?
45 South, 8 a.m.
Okay. Easter egg hunt, Saturday, April 16th. It came up and was discussed today. And there will also be a special needs egg hunt. That's probably my favorite of the day. And if I can't be there, I'll ask Mayor Pro Tem to fill in if I can't be there. I may have a conflict, but we'll work that out. Policy work session, Monday, April 18th, 6:30. And Queen's Jubilee Party, that's a city-sponsored event in downtown Norcross. And just to mention, coming up in May, Viva Mexico, because we won't have a lot of time to make that announcement, is coming up May 7th. I believe Madison Chucky has planned a really cool event with our Hispanic community. And that's all I have, Counsel, unless you have something else to add. If not, let's move to item K, which is board appointments. And we'll start with the Norcross Downtown Development Authority Board.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to appoint John Bemis to the Norcross Downtown Development Authority with a term expiration of December 1st, 2026.
Seconded.
We have a motion by Councilmember Bear, seconded by Councilmember Myers. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raise your right hand saying aye. Opposes, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, let's move to board appointment, Planning and Zoning Board. This is a motion to appoint the applicants to the Planning and Zoning Board with the term to expire June 1st, 2026. Do we have any?
How many positions do we have?
Two? Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Marshall Cheek, I believe. I'm doing this off of, I'm sorry. Yeah, Marshall Cheek and Antonio Henson for the Planning and Zoning Board.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Myers, seconded by Councilmember Gaynor, to appoint the applicants as presented. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposes, same sign. Could you repeat those candidates for the clerk, please?
Yes, those candidates
Marshall.
are Antonio Henson and Marshall Cheek. Terms expire June 1st, 2026.
Good. Okay, let's move on to other board appointments. Sustainable Norcross Commission. I see some of our Sustainable Norcross Commission members out.
And there's also two on this one? They're all three? In the future, can I ask that you add that to the agenda so we know when we're reading it how many? Yeah, just to remind us how many positions are open. Thank you.
And who's a reappointment?
Yep.
We, again, traditionally we do and we have, but as you all, hopefully you all remember, we decided to do it differently with this session. So if we want to go back to what we were doing before, then we certainly can.
Mr. Mayor, that's not what I'm suggesting. Just a tweak to this plan that indicates that there are, how many slots are available. But it's not completely clear, or I don't remember
Okay.
how many slots are available.
Gotcha. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Jacqueline Morgan, Stephanie Barksdale, and Chelsea Humans to the Sustainable Norcross Commission with terms to expire December 1st, 2024.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Baird, seconded by Councilmember Myers. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposes, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. Okay, let's move to item L, which is our agenda, the consent agenda.
Item number 1.
Let me just briefly go back over these so that we are all clear. Then Chair will entertain a motion. These are items that were on for discussion on the consent agenda. Item 1 was discussion. Item 2 was consent. Item 3 was consent. Item 4 was discussion. Item 5 was discussion. Item 6, 7, and 8, and 9.
Item 5 was consent.
No, it was discussion.
Discussion. I agree. I thought it was 2.
It was discussion.
Sorry about that, sir.
No problem. Okay, 6, 7, 8, and 9 were consent. Item 10 was discussion, 11 discussion, and 12 was consent.
And then
Okay.
13.
Yeah, 13, there we go. Yeah, 13 was consent. 14 was discussion. This is a really long agenda. 15 was discussion. 16 was consent. 17 is discussion. Chair will entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
We have a motion by Councilmember Baird to approve the consent agenda. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Myers. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We have an agenda. Let me, as we prepare to get into this lengthy agenda, let me again remind Council that it is lengthy, and please limit your comments, questions, and concerns to the question at hand, if you would. So let's, and the question here is number 1, bridge at Valley and Cochran. So Matthew, if you would come up and talk about that.
Mayor, I'm going to try this one with Matthew as backup. So following up on your last meeting, you had one of the property owners come and raise some concerns, and I met with the couple earlier today. So what we have looked at doing since your last meeting is, and I don't think Keckenwood has done it yet. No, I didn't. But look at, if we can put up page, I think 126 on the screen. Some map. So option 1 is the recommended option. Option 1 is, I think one more page. Option 1 is the path that is more conducive to, yes, thank you, to bicycles, strollers, wheelchairs. So you heard at our last meeting, the residents, right where you can see the arrow on the Cochran side of this option 1, questioning really the sidewalk extending all the way along the end of the cul-de-sac. And if you look more in line with where you can see the bridge, where the path will cross the bridge, comes up next to the driveway on Valley, and then crosses over the dry creek bed. If we continue that path more directly towards the cul-de-sac. We avoid having that area that wraps around, mostly on our right-of-way up on Cochrane. The property owners there are concerned about having that long section of sidewalk when in reality probably no one will use it. So what we've asked Keck and Wood to look at is having a more direct path so that you come across the boardwalk that crosses over the stream, that you have more of a direct route to the cul-de-sac. What the property owner raised last week, and I spoke to them about today, they have a favorite tree that you can see a little bit below the sidewalk as it comes across towards the cul-de-sac. And we, the engineer, our Daniel, our arborist, and I were out there and looked, and so what we do would be to avoid the root system for the tree that is there. What they raised today is that they're concerned that the curb, it's a normal curb, but to make sure that the curb has a cut so that wheelchairs can make it. One of the property owners there currently is using a wheelchair. So I think that we can address their concerns. It'll actually lower some of our costs because we'll need less sidewalk. The one thing to keep in mind is we're trying to make this as ADA compliant as possible, but if you know Cochrane, once you get about half a block up Cochrane, the steepness of the road gets pretty dramatic, and so I think we can address the needs of the people that are interested in being able to get between the two roads, as well as the property owners. And the cost is currently about $41,000, as you can see. If you can go, Monique, one page earlier to one page 125, you can see the cost. This would be the preferred option. The cost is actually a little bit less than the other option. It doesn't include stairs, which make it impossible for someone in a wheelchair. Apparently people are trying to push strollers up that hill today, which is scary. But this would be the recommendation, and I think we can get to a closing. I'm here and talking to them because we actually had Jill Rice, who's our realtor, contact them, and they chose not to deal with a realtor and asked me to talk to them. So that's why I was out there today talking to them. I think we're close to getting them willing to agree to the sale of their property. And I think we already have the verbal concurrence of the property owner on Valley.
Okay,
Glad to
so
answer questions.
option one is your, stay there. Option one is your recommendation?
Yes, it is more amenable to bicycles, it's more amenable to strollers. I left one thing out. They'd like us to put a post in the middle of the sidewalk, I think on both sides, because they don't want ATVs and golf carts driving across that bridge. And they're concerned that we make this too much like a real road, and we'll have not bicycles, but we'll have motorized vehicles trying to cross over.
Okay, at this point, council will open the floor for the discussions. Council member Beer?
Mr. Mayor, City Manager, I'm a little bit confused because our agenda actually says the motion is for option 3, and we have an option 3 here on 133, on slide 133, Monique.
Okay.
That I love the look of.
Yes, well, that would be it. That's what I just described as modifying option 1.
Okay.
And sorry, I didn't realize that we had put in option 3. So yes, you're correct, and I apologize. Option 3 is what I just described.
And the cost is even less on option 3, so.
Less sidewalk.
Okay. So everything that you were saying was describing option.
Yes, sorry, I didn't realize that we had added an option 3 to your backup from the last meeting.
Okay. Councilmember Gaynor, I keep doing that.
Sorry about that.
It's Councilmember Gaynor over here. Councilmember Myers.
No question. I'm waiting for the rest of council to confer. If not, I'll make a motion.
Okay, so to be clear,
It will be option 3. My apology, I didn't realize that the backup had changed since your last meeting. But yes, option 3 is what I just described.
okay.
This is what staff is recommending?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I think we're at the point where we can make a motion at this time.
I like to make a motion to proceed with option 3 for item 21-6335.
We have a motion by Councilmember Myers to approve option 3. Do we have a second?
Yeah.
Second by Councilmember Gaynor. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand, saying aye. Opposes, same sign. Thank you so much. Let's move down to item 4. It's discussion Wi-Fi in the parks.
So I wanted to see
Good evening.
if we could put in,
For Wi-Fi in the parks,
a post on either side of the
the
bridge.
recommendation would be to issue an RFP so I can receive sealed bids by June 30th. That way to look at comparison pricing. If you look at the updates, we have 2 options. Option 1 would be if we actually, option 1 would be if we were to segment out our current network and use our current infrastructure. Some of the parks have cameras, and we can, pull and extend from that to use our current infrastructure at a cost of roughly about $33,000 for the year. Option 2 was one particular vendor that we had looked at, Comcast and Deep Blue, and those cost roughly for startup. You can see those on pages 161, 162, and 163 are to give you the cost of those for the non-reoccurring as well as the reoccurring cost. And that's the reason for issuing an RFP, to get some more competitive bids so I can do a compare and contrast to see which one will work best.
Okay. Thank you for those comments. So the RFP is simply to get information.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions of council at this time? Councilman.
I would just say that, I feel very strongly that Wi-Fi in our parks is not something that council should be providing. We spent millions of dollars to partner with the county to build a state-of-the-art library that has free Wi-Fi in it, high-speed Wi-Fi in it, and lots of nice quiet areas. And I feel like we need to be intentional in Norcross about our recreation areas being places where people are not feeling like they have to be tethered to their screen for whatever reason, and that they're enjoying the outside, they're enjoying their families, and that they're recreating.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
Yes.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Beer, I'm going to counter you. I see Wi-Fi within the city as the framework for a smart city. So we have to start somewhere. If we're looking to progress, I say, yeah, different part. Let's start with it. Set the groundwork.
Any other comments?
Just one.
Councilmember Gaynor?
We don't know what we don't know. I think we should get some bids and figure out what the proposals look like, and then we can make some intelligent decisions as to whether or not to proceed.
Thank you so much, Wilson. I'd like to, first of all, let me thank you for trudging through this process. I know you've been collecting information for 6 months, and as you collect information, it changes.
Yes.
We know that, and then after, if we get our RFPs, it's going to change again. One thing I'd like to just throw out here for council, I have been in touch with a nonprofit who is willing or wants to look at taking on the Pinnacle Park, Wi-Fi in the park, the amenity that we would offer. They would in turn pay for that amenity as part of their project. And they're looking for information from us as to cost. So that one would not cost the city. And it will be a good anchor project to start.
Just for clarification, but they would use the bids that we come up with as their basis for making their determination.
Right. They need that information before they can take it to their board.
Got it.
Yeah, I think the only thing, Mayor, if I may, I
Yes.
just want, as my policy, just personally, is a respect to smart cities, is that We need to be intentional about why we do what we do and where we do what we do. Again, this is only an informational purposes, so I want to stick to the topic, but I want to be certain that in our philosophy and our policy that's pushed forward, at least for me, we need to know why we're doing what we're doing, right? If we're just putting Wi-Fi in the park and that's it, that doesn't get to the meat and potatoes of what we're trying to, what I believe we should be trying to achieve. But again, this is just for information purposes, so I'll proceed with that in mind. We're not making a decision on where we're putting it or if we're putting it at all.
I think if I could add, because I've been part of this project too, digital equity is certainly a long-term goal of Wi-Fi, not only in the parks, but as you mentioned before, in our downtown. There are certainly opportunities to grow and to expand. We live in a technological world now. I hate to say, but we've got to get on with the program. But anyway, those are my comments. Council, Chair will entertain a motion at this time.
Motion to proceed with going out to seek RFPs regarding Wi-Fi in our parks, in our public parks.
We have a motion on the floor by Councilmember Beckles. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Gaynor. Do you have any objections to moving the question?
Mr. Mayor, I wish there could be some clarification as to maybe the actual motion that we have in our agenda could be read, because it doesn't say all of our parks, it says 3 designated parks.
Would the motion, would the maker of the motion be amenable to reading the motion as stated?
Yes, sir. Let me pull it up.
That's right.
Okay. A motion to approve the IT department to proceed with a request for proposals for suitable sealed bids to accomplish all the work needed to install Wi-Fi in 3 designated parks, Thrasher, William Webb, and Pinnacle.
Okay, does that satisfy your? Okay, we do have a motion on the floor, and it's been seconded. All in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye. Opposed, same sign. Okay. Thank you, motion passes. Let's move to item D, library landscaping.
5.
I'm sorry, item 5? D for discussion.
Come on down.
I have a very efficient mayor pro tem up here, so keeping me on. Okay, library landscaping. Merrill.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening.
We're here tonight to discuss, because we have a motion for the item concerning library landscaping. Are there any questions from last week, 2 weeks ago?
Any questions? I know you were quite thorough in your explanation, and council has had an opportunity to read over the information. So, council, do you have any questions or concerns to bring up at this time? If not, then chair will entertain a motion.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the removal of existing plant material on hillside between the library building and Buford Highway, Britt Road corner, and replace as shown on the attached plan with the cost totaling $77K, partially funded by fiscal year 2022 budget of $32K, and a request to use mayor and council contingency to pay for the unfunded balance of $45K.
We have a motion on the floor by Councilmember Myers. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Beckles. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
No.
Opposes? Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move to item 10. Cdbg application proposals for FY 2023 funds. You have the floor, Matthew.
I'm sorry?
You have the floor.
Yeah, this is just, the only update that I have is that we have the letter ready for signature, and we're about to submit the application. It's due on the 6th. We completed the application. I was just waiting on a couple of questions to be responded to, and it's about to be submitted, so we're just waiting on council's approval.
Very good. Any questions, council, at this time? Having heard no questions, Chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the completion and submittal of the FY 2023 online Cdbg application for available funds awarded through the Community Development Block Grant.
We have a motion on the floor by Councilmember Baird. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Beckles. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes. Okay, let's go to item 11, speed and traffic calming measures studies update on selected city roadways.
Good evening. This is an update to the speed and traffic calming measure studies. After the policy work session that we had last week, Chief Grogan and myself met to discuss the recommendations and the concerns that were brought up by council. We actually tweaked the recommendations, and they're shown on the list of recommendations. Monique, if you don't mind just going to that list. It's actually a little bit further down. Yeah, it's that table. So the first thing is that we're still waiting on the Gwinnett County's feedback and input regarding the analysis and recommendations that the consultant discussed in their traffic study on Holcomb Bridge Road. Our understanding is that per the policy work session, the discussion, that there was interest in reducing the speed limit to 25 along all the studied segments, and we just wanted to kind of get confirmation for that. The third recommendation was to install radar speed feedback signs along the segments that are shown on there. 3 along South Beach Tree Street, 1 before the Y split, and 2 before the split. 2 along North Beach Tree Street, and 1 along Thrasher Street, and 1 along West Beach Tree Street. And these were actually brought up because of a couple of the concerns and the comments that were brought up by council. The biggest one is actually 2 traffic circles. After looking into North Beach Tree and hearing some of the feedback, we discussed maybe putting 2 traffic circles, one at the intersection with Cochran Drive and the other one along Oak Terrace. These are going to have to be evaluated by on-call professionals, just make sure that we have the room, we have no drainage issues, site distance issues, any other issues along North Peachtree Street. One thing about these traffic circles, even if we cannot put a circle, we can actually shape it into an oval type island to provide that speed reduction or speed reducing measure. The fifth recommendation was to utilize the LED stop signs, and this was actually brought up by Chief. Recommend to install 4 along, proposed at the intersection of Lake Drive with Peachtree Street and North Peachtree Street and Sunset Drive. And these are just, there's one already at Lake Drive, but there has been some concerns regarding the speeding on the street. So there was a recommendation from Chief to change those to LED lights. Last one is relocate the flashing beacon at Sunset to Buchanan Street, since we're actually adding a stop sign at Sunset. Okay. The estimated cost is about $106,000, $500.
Okay, thank you so much. Sure. Let me just remind council, this is an update. We're not making a decision on this tonight. We will have a full policy session to cover, but if you have any pressing questions that you want to throw out tonight, you certainly can.
So we're not approving anything?
The study, based on what I'm hearing, is not complete.
No, the study is complete. The only thing is just kind of reevaluate the two traffic circles that are proposed along North Beach Street.
As well as approval from the county before we could.
No, that's the city, sorry.
Holcomb.
Holcomb, yeah, Holcomb Bridge. We can't do anything on Holcomb Bridge unless Gwinnett County okays the recommendations.
We could still approve it and wait for them.
We can
Yes.
approve it, and then upon their.
Subject to their concurrence.
Subject to their concurrence, yeah.
Or we can approve everything except anything related to to Holcomb Bridge Road.
Okay, I'd like to make an amendment to that we include, first of all, just want to make sure that I understand. When you say Sunset Drive, you're saying a three-way stop?
Yes,
Okay, I didn't
Sunset and
understand.
North Park.
So North Peachtree and Sunset,
yes,
so three-way stop there?
yes.
So I can take that off my list.
And relocate that flashing beacon over to Buchanan.
Love that.
That's a great idea. I would like to add to that list, exploring or adding, if possible. You said Oak Terrace, so there's a traffic circle there.
I don't remember us discussing that.
I don't recall it, but I wasn't at that meeting,
No,
so
we
it might have been brought up as part of that
We
meeting.
discussed an extra high raised crosswalk.
I think we were looking at,
Discuss stop sign.
we were looking at two things, options
And
and a
pedestrian
ramp
crossings.
to propel a car into the air.
Right.
So,
We did discuss a stop sign and a crosswalk at Oak Terrace.
In North Beach Street.
Yeah.
and North
But,
Beach.
the traffic circle is new to me, so I didn't know where that came from.
And traffic circle, is it a roundabout you're talking about?
It's the same concept, but a little bit smaller, about 15, 18 feet wide
So
in diameter.
Is this
You
the
gotta hit
Berkeley
the
Lake?
British, with me. I heard traffic circle and was get crazy, a roundabout.
Yeah, is this the Berkeley Lake style?
Something
It's not
very,
really a
very-
traffic circle, it's just more of a large island that's
Yeah,
round?
yeah. But it's called a traffic circle.
Is it?
Based on, the
Okay,
ITEs.
because you don't actually go all the way around it for any,
What it allows for the circle around if you want to, but definitely certain vehicles, not all the vehicles.
Okay. Then-
It's,
Okay.
visually, it'll slow vehicles down as they approach it.
I'd rather have a stop sign, that'll slow them
Well, I
down.
think it's both. There's the Berkeley Lake example, there's a round, could be called a traffic circle, but it's a round island, and it's a three-way stop.
It's controlled by stop signs,
That's right.
yes.
Seems
So,
overkill.
I mean, I'm not,
And most like,
it's attractive. It's a very attractive-looking intersection.
yes. And again, if we're going to be putting a traffic circle, most likely it's going to be controlled by yield signs or stop signs, depending on what the consultant recommends.
Yes.
So
So,
let me just, because we have a very aggressive agenda, council, are we prepared to move on this issue tonight?
Yes,
Or
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Mayor.
make a motion, please?
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to accept the speeds that were recommended by the study. I would like to make, and to move forward with these recommendations here, except for the traffic circles, pull those out, and then go back to what we talked about at our policy meeting, which was a stop sign at Oak Terrace with pedestrian crossings.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor, council. Do we have a second?
all right.
Do-
Point of order, Mr. Mayor, can I have explanation?
We have a motion on the floor. If we don't have a second,
Okay.
then the motion dies.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Now we can open the floor for additional questions. Your question.
So I'd like to amend the motion to also add Georgetown Park and Holcomb Bridge stop sign. I understand that it's subject to the approval of the county, but it's our desire to move in that direction. I'd also like a similar stop sign at Mitchell and Everglades, which is a raceway by everybody's that I've spoken with that lives in the area, and this is a good way to start to slow that traffic down.
Okay, we have an amendment to the motion. Do we have a second to the amendment to the motion?
Yeah, I think it would be best if, I think we're in the same situation we started with last time. I know we've got a big agenda. We also have a lot on the consent agenda. This is probably the biggest thing we're going to talk about tonight. And I'd like for us to get to a solution, so.
Is that a stop sign at Marshall's Glen,
Sorry, Mitchell Road and Everglades,
Mitchell and Everglades, okay?
and Georgetown and Holcomb Bridge.
Okay, we do need a
I'll
second.
second it.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to amend. We will vote on the motion to amend. All in favor, let it be known by raise your right hand saying aye to the amendment.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposes, same sign. Two opposes. Okay. Now, let's go back to the original motion.
As amended.
Any additional questions to the original motion?
I have a question. Councilmember Bear said the recommended speed limits in here, and we had discussed lowering the speed limits on all city-controlled roads to 25 miles an hour. Is that still your intention with this, or just to accept because there was really a lot of confusion about, but where was it? Matt, you had brought it up. There's 3 different speed limits.
Yeah, to me, what is really important to me in this is the consistency of speed limits. I've already got multiple constituents reach out to me about that particular part of the study. They didn't say anything about the stop signs, but I think the stop signs are great. I do support the stop signs, but I don't support us having the disjointed speed limits that were in the study. I'd be more supportive of keeping them the same or moving them to some consistency. The lower of the above is what we talked about. We asked council, and it was recommended to us that we would pick the lowest of that. But we can't go any higher than what was recommended. So from my perspective, I would like to take the lower of the 25 miles per hour on all those recommendations where they said go from 35 to 30. I'd say, because they have some where this is 35 to 30, 30 to 25. It's just 30, just move it to 25 would be my recommendation, and find those locations where you could do that at certain stop signs where you can go from one section to the next, or when we diverge from 2 lanes down to 1, then changes to 25. And these are neighborhood streets by and large. Most of these streets that we reviewed are houses on either side of those, just like any other neighborhood that's typically 25. So I feel strongly about that it should be 25.
I would just say, Councilmember Myers, that the chief felt like having the step-down speeds was the better way of going about it, so that people weren't going 40 and then all of a sudden needed to be going 25, and that with Councilmember Gaynor's addition of these stop signs, it actually is and the Oak Terrace stop sign, it actually brings people to a stop, and there could be an updated speed limit sign after that stop sign, so that they know that as they resume on their way, they're going to need to slow things down even more. So, I know council has dug pretty far in the weeds on this, but I am deferring a little bit to the consultant's recommendations, with the thought that we could always come back later and tighten everything down even further to 25 across the whole town, with the exception of a few streets.
Can I make an addition?
Yes,
So the only street that we have with the 35, 30, 25 is Holcomb Bridge, which is going to be subject to Gwinnett County's approval. But the other 2 have the 25 or 30. So the only one that has that changing 3 or 4 speed limits is actually Holcomb Bridge.
Yeah, and I don't have that other presentation in front of me, but in that presentation, I believe there was one off of South Beach Street as well. Because that's the only other one that had that change. Right. Right, so the current speed limit is 35, and we were, of the whole area of South Peachtree, and, I'm trying to read this, I believe it's South Peachtree and whatever the other street diverges there. And the-
Norcross.
Yeah, and the recommendation said to split those current, which is just 35 on one street, at Veterans essentially, to split it off to two different speed limits. And I thought it would be consistent to put it at one speed limit since it's one road. And you're just yielding
All the
on.
way to Beaufort Highway, and then across Beaufort Highway, then there's a change, a natural.
There's a natural stop
opportunity for
sign
change.
there's a natural opportunity for it to change. That's the only other location. Holcomb Bridge, my intent here was that the Gwinnett County would really dictate what we'd be able to do there from maximizing or reducing speed limits down. But this particular road, to me, I thought was important to be consistent.
Would you like to make a motion to that effect?
I have a motion on the table.
Amendment to the motion.
Amendment to the motion.
Yeah, I would like to make an amendment to the motion that South Peachtree remain the lower of the two options provided by the study.
Second.
Okay, we have an amendment to the motion. And you have a motion and a second. Any additional questions relative to the amendment? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raise your right hand, saying aye.
All right.
Opposed, same sign. Amendment passes. Let's go back to the original motion if we can get through this. And we have a motion and a second. Isn't that right, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any additional questions? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raise your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Okay. Let's go to item 14, Sanitation Services Rfp.
So, Mayor and Council, I've provided you some additional information. I want to, on the record, thank Melissa Ziegler for doing some of the research for that. The key tonight is you have a couple options before you. I've made a recommendation to consider an extension of the existing contract with Waste Management, primarily because of the fact that while we anticipate significant increases in our costs, regardless of whether we go out for RFP or we extend our existing contract, at the time that we potentially would change contractors, I think you'd have a potential for service interruption. So the question for you is the potential of getting a better price by going out for competition worth the potential that if anyone other than Waste Management were to be selected as a result of that RFP, are you comfortable with the fact that there could be some service disruption just because of the change in provider? And so I'd be glad to answer any questions. We've tried to respond. The mayor had some questions. Dr. Beckles had a question earlier today. You could add a third option, which is to negotiate more than a one-year contract with Waste Management. That certainly would be a third option.
Okay, thank you, Eric, for that presentation. Certainly appreciate it, and also appreciate the follow-up. Council will open the floor for questions at this time.
Mr. Mayor. The current contract includes leaf pickup and stick pickup. Leaf pickup is 3 months during the year, and stick pickup is every week, I believe. Or is it every other week?
I think it's every week.
I think that might be every week.
It's every
I think
week.
it's every week. Can we take that out of the contract that we bid to the whomever, in order that we can take on that contracting ourselves? I think
so
that's
we
a
could.
question to,
If you're asking me, y'all are advertising?
You want the city to take on that?
Yeah.
city would take the responsibility for contracting.
The city would take, so the city wouldn't do it themselves.
Well, I wouldn't preclude that option.
Okay. The subcontractor you have now, Imagescapes, is paired with us, and we're a team. Certainly, we could consider splitting it. I don't know if the city would want to do that based on having a one-stop shop. And as far as privatizing yourself, doing it yourself, you got out of the business a long time ago. And what Imagescapes does for you is a Cadillac service. They pick up unlimited at the curb yard waste, sticks. They also do the vacuum service, which is 3 months out of the year, which is a really, I think, a high-level service that your Norcross citizens are accustomed to.
I'm not suggesting we reduce any services.
But what you're suggesting is to separate it, where the city pays on one invoice for yard waste, and the city pays us for recycling and bulk. Is that what you're talking about? I think it could be done. I mean, as long as, I guess, both of us are in game, because we've got, of course, costs we've been through over a long period of time. And as long as that's consistent, then I think that's possible. Yes, sir.
You just break that piece out of your contract, basically.
Yeah,
We then would contract with either the same company, or, we'd make our determination as to who we'd use ourselves.
Right.
Separately.
One of the issues with that, Councilmember, is that there's not a whole lot of companies out there that give that level of service that you have now. So just caution you on that.
Mr. Mayor, I'm not exactly clear what staff's recommendation is, or if staff has a recommendation. I guess I'd love to hear what that is.
Yeah, so I have recommended that we do a one-year extension. Is that up there? And it's primarily because my expectation is, given current world conditions and fuel prices, and I confirmed earlier today, the trucks that are providing service today are diesel, so they're impacted by fuel prices. We're not yet in the CNG business. That going out for a multi-year competitive process, my assumption is you're going to get firms that have to take into consideration current costs, and so we're going to have a significant increase in cost, but to wrap around that the potential impact of changing providers, and we don't know. I mean, Waste Management could win it. A lot of times the existing provider has the ability to be very competitive simply because they're already in the market, they understand it, they're servicing the area. But if we went with any of the other companies, and I sent you some additional information on some of the companies. Waste Management is the largest, Republic is next largest, Waste Pro is a regional, they have significant size. Once you get past those three, you're dealing with fairly local firms. I mean, there's a small firm out of South Carolina, and there's another small firm out of Hall County. But it's simply the potential for disruption of service, simply because it's a new vendor learning the community. But, there's a reasonable chance that Waste Management would win a competition. So it's really, it's up to you and where you'll feel comfortable come September, with the combination of a price increase, but also the potential for a service disruption. And you know better than staff will in terms of where you think your constituents would be on that issue.
Does that answer your question? Okay, any other questions relative to
Well,
Councilmember Gaynor?
sorry, I have nothing against our current supplier. I just want to make that clear. However, I have a lot against no-bid contracts. And I think we do our citizens a disservice by accepting a price increase without any kind of competitive bids, without any indication at all as to how that compares to the market. I think that an extension, a renegotiation of the contract, our current supplier is in a great position to continue to get that contract by remaining competitive and giving an opportunity for the other companies to weigh in and making sure that we're doing the right thing for our constituents and not reacting to a short-term situation. No matter what we do, we're expecting a big price increase, and I can't vote for going out and accepting a price increase without having some competitive inputs from the marketplace.
Any other comments?
Yeah, to be clear, just so I have clarification, are we redrawing the contract with new pricing, or are we just extending the current contract another year? Because I guess the definition for me is extension is it's same terms and conditions, just
Same
extend it
price.
another 12 months.
I think the difference is the price.
So,
we're not-
so it's not an extension, it's an amendment, a full amendment
Well,
of the
it's-
contract.
Steve, if you would come up.
It is it's an extension with different prices, based on the market, based on the
So,
world today, as
so
you know.
technically an amendment to the contract.
Yes.
It's not following the current contract, so
The prices, yes, sir.
We lose money on every trash bin that our residents get picked up, right?
Yeah, well, right now, we're subsidizing residential collection with non-residential collection. So I sent you some sample prices, and I can send you some more, but the residential currently, we're charging about $8 a year less than what it costs us. And that's in terms of the direct costs from waste management. The non-residential side is not only picking up that cost, but also picking up our overhead, because we have staff that are partially charged to sanitation fund, since we're billing that to commercial on a monthly basis, and we're and billing it to residential as part of their tax bill each year. So we have overhead costs that are at this point being entirely recovered through the non-residential portion of our billing.
Go ahead, Councilman.
I completely agree with Councilmember Gaynor's commentary about going out for bid when we're talking about a price increase. The only thing that holds me back a little bit is that I'm experiencing, at least in the business world right now, unprecedented times in terms of being able to find staff and being able to find equipment and being able to find materials. And so, due to those unprecedented circumstances, I'm leaning more towards a one-year extension, just to buy us a little bit more time, by the situation a little bit more time for there to be more flexibility. Just because I've been involved in politics in Norcross for a while, and garbage is a particularly important topic, and it's something that I've seen lots of flare-ups and so on garbage before, when there's not consistency in pickup. And so I know that it's something that's very important to our citizens. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think I'm leaning more towards some consistency in the short term, until hopefully the business world calms down a little bit.
Can I address one comment? We're not talking about what we're charging the residents in this conversation. We're talking about the contract we have with the supplier. So what we charge our residents is a whole nother discussion.
That's true.
That we can have with respect to how to subsidize that, who to charge. All of those things, I think, are for a future date. So let's put that aside for the moment. We do have to be concerned about service delivery. We have roughly 6 months to make a contract and phase in a new supplier, or the same supplier we have, we can approve. Remember, we don't have to take the lowest bid. We just have to take the best bid. And we can use existing service and existing mitigating factors like service interruptions and things like that as a modifier to any contract we look at. I just feel that by going out to the marketplace, we have a better picture of what's available, and we're keeping everybody sharp. And I think that's our job.
Any other comments? Well, I'd have to make a comment because I think it's important that, as a council, we make sound and prudent decisions. I had the opportunity, or took the opportunity, to meet with another vendor to get some insight on what it would, how much time it would take, the effort that it would take to retool if the city were to change vendors. I didn't get a good answer, and I actually didn't get a good feel for the answer that was given to me. Roughly a 90-day transitional period with bringing equipment in from all over the country, and this was a major vendor which will go unnamed. I think, and I'm just going to voice my opinion, I think we should go with the management's recommendation for an extension, because these are unprecedented times. There are supply chain issues, as Mayor Pro Tem can attest to, that not only his company, but all of our companies are dealing with. So these are unsettling times, and there are a lot of issues and a lot of unknowns out there. We could go out and we could submit RFPs, and we may not be happy with the consequences because of the increases. And of course, we charge our customers differently than what we pay, but I think our customers have a high level of expectation of service, and I don't think they would want their service hindered in any way, shape, or form. I know the citizens of Norcross, there's a high expectation of service here, and we, as a council, we have to be very careful and cautious about our decisions that we make. So having said that, any other additional questions? Okay, Chair will entertain a motion or an amendment, whichever comes first, right?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to, let's see here, we don't really have this written down. Okay, I'd like to make a motion to authorize staff to do a one-year extension with our current garbage provider.
Second.
There's been a motion on the floor to extend the current contract and negotiation for 1 year. Is that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
And we have a second. Any objection to moving the question? Any additional questions? Question.
I'd like it to be noted that it's not a contract extension, it's a contract amendment, because we will be changing price as well as adding a year, so.
I did say amendment, so.
Yeah, oh, I know you said, I just want to make sure that, because the motion read as extension.
Yeah. Okay.
I'd be
Duly-
willing to amend it.
duly noted.
That it's an amendment to, that it's an approval of a amendment to the contract, an extension of a year.
Duly noted. Any additional questions? Having heard none, we have a motion and second. All in favor, let it be known by raise your right hand saying aye. Opposed is same sign.
Opposed.
Motion passes. Okay, let's move to Norcross letter art installation. City Manager
I'll
Eric
take
Johnson,
that.
your name's under there.
Yes, sir. So we've been looking at a potential, can you bring up the map? Potential location of Stevens and Buford Highway. At your last discussion, I think where you may have arrived was that while this may or may not be the final location, a concern about moving forward and identifying location. So I was out there with Mr. Zaki, who can provide some additional detail. The one thing that we looked at is that there is an insufficient stormwater, is it an inlet? At the bottom of the parking lot. This was a unique design that the parking lot is intended to flood up to about a foot before it'll spill over the bank. And so what we've looked at is, as you can see on the diagram, adding an additional pipe from the parking lot that would go over by the sidewalk along Stevens. And what that does is it replaces the black plastic pipe that you currently see kind of cascading down the hill directly towards where we would put the Norcross letters. So the one implication of that is that there's some trees at the top of the slope. One of them, I think, is just a crepe myrtle, but there's another tree. Unfortunately, our arborist was out there, and he couldn't identify what the tree is because the leaves on the tree are about a 1/4 inch long. So, but I don't think that he had any great concern about the fact that to put that line that you see on the diagram from the end of the parking lots, the line to the right, over towards the sidewalk would remove that tree, but it would allow us to take out a lot of the big granite stones that are showing up. So there'll be some costs. I just want to make sure that you understand that we can do that work ourselves. They have looked at where the utilities are. They had utility locate services done. The other thing to consider is it okay to take down the sign that was there for the library that would be in the back of a picture if you take a picture? There's nothing on the sign now, but it's, I don't know if Donnie is still here, I don't think so, but he was out there along with Mr. Zaki, and we can do a lot of that ourselves. There is a sewer line, but it's significantly underground, so it should not prevent us from doing what we're going to do. We are going to be fairly close to that sewer line. But the one thing I would ask you about is, other than the fact that we'll incur some in-house costs and some out-of-pocket costs to pour a pad there, when some of us were out there a few weeks ago, we talked about curving it. The challenge with trying to curve the letters is that trying to get it so that the back of the letters aren't too close and the front start to splay out. So I think our recommendation would be to just try to position it in a straight line. But Matthew, anything you'd like to add? I mean, it should be a good location. We're going to try to make sure that the letters are far enough back that if you want to take a photo of someone standing by the letters, that you're not standing out in the street. And Donnie and Matthew stood at each end of a 30-foot length, and I was not in the street when I took their picture. So we think that location would work.
Well, thank you so much for that information, City Manager Eric Johnson. A lot of the details, of course, we can leave to staff to figure out.
At this point, we haven't looked at lighting, but that's something that could be added. There's a light pole there's a city light pole that needs to be removed because it would be in the picture. But there's electricity from the city pole that's serving that street light. This is one of those, I think, fiberglass poles with the decorative light at the top. So I would suggest that maybe we look at doing the installation, then come back and get your thoughts about how you want to light that, whether it's above lighting or ground lighting.
Well, again, we certainly believe that you have the expertise out there with staff to work out the fine details. Counsel, do we have any additional questions?
I have a question, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Beckles.
Could you bring up the other picture that I sent in? Please, I'm sorry. I sent a picture of the leaves, and it had people standing on it, on one of my peers. Shoot, I got it in my phone. Are we settled on this location? Because I still think that really and truly the park here, Lillian Webb, is the better place for this art piece right now.
I think the consideration here, in looking at it, it says a proposed temporary or permanent location.
So we're paying twice to move. They're going to install it and move it again someplace else when we decide about a permanent location. Why can't we just put it in Lillian Webb? That was the original intent.
I think there was quite a bit of concern about Lillian Webb being not the best place for a number of reasons in the past discussions. This gives us an opportunity to put it someplace temporarily and consider a permanent home, potentially when we have purchased some property to put it on, or maybe it stays here. So this is an interim move to avoid it being in a warehouse.
Okay, and I heard mention of taking pictures on, you know, the letters and all that. At that corner right there, so I'm gonna park my car, get on the walk and go take a picture, tumble over and fall into the streets.
I don't know about that.
I still think we need to just go ahead and look for the permanent place right now, and I, again, would pitch it back to a park or another gateway, but not Buford Highway, where we're gonna install it and then remove it.
There's certainly options out there. Counsel, any additional questions before moving on the issue? Chair will entertain a motion at this time.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the placement of the Norcross letter art installation at the proposed temporary or permanent location at Stevens and Buford Highway.
We have a motion by Councilmember Baird. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Gaynor. Any objection to moving the question? Having heard none, all in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, motion passes. Let's move to item 17, adoption of the proposed 2023 SPLOST allocations. City Manager Johnson has this one.
I think where you last were was to consider whether to increase the transportation component. And obviously to increase the transportation component, which I think coming into your last meeting was 40%. And 40% for administrative facilities and 20% for Parks and Rec. You talked about increasing transportation and potentially reducing one or more of the others. And I don't know that you arrived at any specific percentages, but I would just say I think transportation, you can probably never put enough money into transportation. The question is, if you want to do administrative facilities for the public safety building, I think we're going to have to look at some bonding capacity to do that project anyway. And you know, part of the discussion was how much do you want to carve out for Parks and Recreation. So with that, just
Okay, let's just be clear of the percentages. 40% transportation. Can you give me the other percentages?
yeah, where we were coming into last meeting was 40% transportation, 40% administrative facilities, and 20% for Parks and Rec. And each of those is about $2.3 million, a little bit more than $2.3 million based on the best estimates that we have. We still have not gotten any official numbers from the county.
And that 20% was, again?
20% would be, I mean, I would call it Parks and Recreation. Historically, you've described it as recreation, but we're really spending it on park facilities.
Right. Okay, Council, you've heard the recommendation. Chair will entertain any a motion or questions this time.
Just a quick question. You
Yeah.
said $2.3 million was
For each 10%.
for each 10%?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I actually have not made a recommendation that the 40, 40, 20 came out of your retreat. And it was the number that you brought into your last meeting. But where you left the last meeting was, I don't think changing the numbers, but I think there was the discussion about going either to 50% for transportation or 55% transportation, but I don't think you arrived at any official different set of numbers in that last meeting.
Make a motion to approve SPLOST allocation of 55% to transportation, 15% to parks, and 30% to administration.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. It's slightly different than, but that's good. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Hickson, seconded by Councilmember Beckles for 55% transportation, 15%
Parks.
and 30% admin.
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. Any objection to moving that question?
I'd like to offer an amendment.
No.
And an amendment to the amendment?
We got 2 amendments in this meeting. I've never seen that before.
Okay.
I'd like to amend the percentages to 50% for transportation, and 30% for administrative, and 20% for parks.
Second.
So is this a substitute motion or
Yes.
is it
Well, it's modifying, I don't know.
it's more of a substitute?
Yeah, I would call a
motion
question on my motion. I would ask that the chair would consider that.
To consider
what?
your motion?
Consider that there's a motion on the floor. It's been
Right.
properly seconded. This is not an amendment to my motion. This is completely changing my motion. I
This-
would ask that the
this
chair will
is-
consider calling the question.
Okay, and you're absolutely right, because this would be a substitute motion, not actually an amendment.
Okay.
So we'll take a vote on the original motion, 55, 15, and 30, just to be clear. Any objection to moving that question? All in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Opposed?
Okay. Motion passes. Very good. Okay. Is that our last agenda item?
Oh, gosh, please.
City Manager, a question in regards to the last passed SPOS. Could you do 2 things for me? Could you walk us through that this is just a recommendation, that we have up until when to finalize our percentages?
Yes.
And then secondly, have we gotten anywhere on the amounts and categories for all our SPOSs? You can go at 2009, 2004, 2017 SPOSs. Do we have where those allocations are today?
I could, in terms of how they've been spent?
Yeah, how much is remaining balance in each category?
No, we don't have that. The complication with 2017 is that we issued $8 million in bonds, and so we have to track for 2017 both how the bonds have been spent as well as how the revenue has been spent, a portion of which has been spent paying debt on the bonds. So I've
We think we can
talked to our new finance director.
do we get that by our next policy session?
We will try. We're working with the details that are available to us to try to sort that through. But
And then the first question is, when's the go-ready date that we have to have these final
so
numbers?
I think under the state, or under the county's schedule, they wanted numbers by June. And they had, I think, optimistically given us a couple months ago a schedule that suggested that they wanted us to have our numbers by March. But we have, I think the county has gone dark in terms of telling us anything new. So so we're still waiting to see. But they need to give us the estimate of what our share would be. And they have not done that yet. So to your original part of your question, my suggestion is do what you done tonight. Give us percentages, but with the understanding that you can revisit those until the county locks us in. And so if anything comes up or we come back and we talk about how much of the, I don't think there's much of the 2009 left. I think there's maybe just a few dollars, so that one is pretty much gone. 2014, as far as I know, all of the money that's left is in administrative facilities, so that's why I'm suggesting that the money that we set aside last year, the $1 million for capital projects, of which this year's budget was going to spend a little over half of that, that since most of those are admin facility type improvements, that we actually take those costs not out of the capital fund, but take them out of the 2014 SPLOST and free up that capital dollars, which going into this next budget gives you the most flexibility in how you use that. And you could use that for the public safety building, but you could use that for other projects because it has no strings attached.
We could use it for parks.
You could use it for parks, or you could use it for a railroad crossing of either nature. So,
Which what you're saying is absolutely
Unrestricted.
true.
yeah, use your most restricted monies first, and because the less restricted monies can be used for the same purposes that the restricted could be, but a lot of other uses as well. But we just have to kind of work that through, and we're a week into Paul's participation with the city, so.
Well, thank you so much. I wanted to.
But that's important to me. I mean, that's something I hope that we would get to earlier, but.
Right. I wanted to make sure that, for the record, that we understood that, not that anyone here didn't, but that the audience understood that we can set these percentages and we still have some time to change those based on getting other information, like if there's you said, as admin still left in 2014, we may tweak some of these numbers.
Yes, sir.
To make the same amount, because we've got to play with it, but we want to know the full picture before we lock these in. Thank you.
And we follow up questions at the next work session also.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that was our last agenda item. Anything else council needs to bring at this time?
Just one point. Mr. City Manager, the audit is now some months late. Where does it stand, and when, do you have any estimate as to when we might have an audit?
You heard anything? The auditor had told me that he hoped to be done by the end of March, so it was due at the end of February. The state gave us a 6-month extension, which is, we didn't ask for a 6-month extension, but that's automatic. We'll have to see. Every time we...
At the end of March, it's now.
Yeah, it's the first week of April. The challenge, I think, for the auditor is that they have to fit the additional work on our audit in with any other audits that they have contracted to provide. So every time that we missed a deadline going back to the fall, they had to try to reschedule us along with their other clients. So we'll get an answer. I can call the auditor tomorrow and send you all what he tells me tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, and let me just say for the audience, additional questions after the agenda is highly irregular, but because we're in strange times right now, there are some irregular things that we've had to allow for, especially tonight. So any additional questions we can ask at the policy session with an advertised agenda item so that all of our residents know ahead of time what we're discussing. Okay, motion to adjourn and go into exec for personnel, real estate, and legal.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn and go into exec for personnel.
In real estate?
Real estate.
I've got an update on real estate.
And
Okay,
legal.
real estate.
I think I just said personnel, real estate, and legal.
Okay, yes, I could see. Personnel, real estate, and legal.
Thank you. Now we have a motion. Is there a second? Motion and second to go into exec for personnel, real estate, and legal. All in favor, let it be known by raising your right hand, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, this same sign. Motion passes. We'll go upstairs in the conference room. He told me that today, that you heard.
Why can't you make an amendment like that? How else can he amend it?
Was it Friday night?